I'm always curious to know. I was looking at your resume. You go back, like your first IMDb credit is 1996. You've been in a lot of films over the years. Can you feel like, okay, this is going to be a hit? When you're in that filming process, could you feel when you were in the first John Wick, like this is really going to resonate? Or do you just never know? Are you just kind of just playing it by ear?
I mean, I can generally tell if something's going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not it's going to resonate is another story.
Mm.
I'm trying to think if I've ever done anything that I thought was going to be good that ended up just not being good.
Mm-hmm.
But for John Wick, I mean, like I said, one of the reasons why I wanted to do it was because the script was so good. I've just never seen that story told in that way before, and the characters were so rich. And then once I saw it, well, let me go back because when I was shooting, I didn't see any of the action, so I had nothing to gauge. Do you know what I mean? Because I wasn't part of any of that stuff.
Right.
So, so I guess that's a long way of saying no. I don't know.
You don't know.
No.
You never know what's gonna hit, because you can have really good films that come out, really amazing films that just don't do well, and you're like, you never know. But I mean, this is clearly
I've been in some dogs.
No, you have a good resume.
Well, I've got in TV. I've been consistently I've been really fortunate. I've been like in hit after hit after hit.
Right.
High quality stuff.
Well, let's talk about The Wire for a minute, because I can't not talk about The Wire. Man, that just changed. That changed television. That was huge. I mean, how did that story? Because wait, are you from Baltimore?
Yeah, I grew up in Baltimore.
Yeah, and this is placed in Baltimore.
Yeah.
How did that story affect you as a, young black man from Baltimore, and you're in this film that kind of unpacks what life was like?
Well, actually, in terms of how it, you mean how did it affect me in terms of my perception of the city?
Yeah, as a person from B-more.
Believe it or not, in terms of that, I feel like I was more affected by The Corner, which I was also in.
Exactly.
But which was David Simon and Ed Burns, the creators of The Wire, they also created The Corner, and actually wrote the book that The Corner was based on. And The Corner is even more purely biographical, purely historical than The Wire is. So for me, that was kind of the first, because even though all my relatives live in West Baltimore from my father's side, I didn't really grow up over there. So it was kind of eye-opening to see kind of to experience kind of what being in that life was like. For me, it was more eye-opening. The Wire was more eye-opening in terms of understanding how politics and policing and race intersect. I mean, I didn't understand. Particularly, I mean, even if you eliminate the issue of race, how politics affects policing, how really what gets policed and who gets called criminals is based on the politics of who they think their constituency is, and very often it's not who's getting policed and criminalized.
Absolutely. No, that was important, man. That was massive. That was important. I was looking at your Twitter feed, and I saw that you've made a couple retweets about Ilhan Omar, who I love. And I'm just curious to know, what do you think about, I saw you tweeting about it, so I was curious to know, what do you think about the way she's being treated?
The way she's being treated?
Yeah.
I think she's being targeted because she's a person of color and she's a Muslim. I don't know that I want to get into what I think about anything specific that she said.
Yeah, sure.
Although, I mean, I do think that there was personally, I think there was an overreaction to her original comments about.
And she apologized.
Yeah. The wording more than the content.
Yeah.
You know, but I just think it's it's interesting because I'm so vocal on Twitter, even though ironically I've actually kind of gone off social media the past month, and I'm actually taking a year off.
Okay. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Why?
I feel like I'm constantly checking it. I'm constantly, do you know what I mean? My life has become about checking social media as opposed to about like reading.
Yeah.
Even so much of my news I get. It's not that I sit and I go and I get the Post every day, but I don't sit and read through the Post every day the way my wife does. You know, I'll like go on Twitter. I would go on Twitter and then see an article and then read the article and then have a reaction and then tweet about it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I just feel, just for myself personally, I want to get back to just kind of developing myself personally and being more well informed, just informing myself before I kind of go off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus going by a Twitter headline.
Yeah.
You know,
although, you know, generally,
yeah,
even if I see a Twitter headline, I'll try to read the entire article before, because you know, that's bitten me in the butt enough times that I know that, you know, I have to at least know something of what I'm talking about before I say something.
Yeah, I saw some folks commenting under your Ilhan Omar post, like, you know, oh, he's progressive, you know, trying to figure out your politics or whatever.
Oh, well, I don't think my politics are a mystery. Given my history on my social media history.
Yeah. So
I mean, if you go, and I'm not a huge believer in labels, but if I had to label myself, I'd say I'm a progressive.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think sometimes the word progressive gets labeled with politics, and maybe in some ways it is, but I think progressive is just wanting the progress, man. Progress as a country. You know, we put a Democrat or Republican label on it, but if you want to progress, you want to progress.
I'm not a huge fan of either one of those labels.
Yeah, I get it, man.
I mean, I have more issues with Republican.
Yeah, of course.
Just particularly the way they've been handling themselves since the Obama administration, through Trump. I just think it's despicable. It
feels un-American.
The lack of care for the public good.
Yeah. It's scary. It's interesting. Halle Berry is in John Wick 3. I was surprised to see that. So I was like, Halle Berry, because Halle Berry. Well, no, she does her action, but it's more
I've never seen her do action like this.
Yeah, it's more like Kidnapped or The Call. Like, but this is like, so
even when she was in James Bond.
Right.
I never saw her
Die
do
Another
this.
Day.
I mean, this was some badass. Halle kicked butt in this.
So tell us about what Miss Halle's doing in John Wick 3.
Wow. Well, once again, I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but I think people can gather from the trailers that she's a fellow assassin, somebody that John has known for a very long time, and he goes to her for help.
Yeah.
And you know, because he's John Wick, she ends up finding herself getting into mixing stuff she didn't want to get mixed into. But when she goes there, she goes there. I mean, kicking, flying, shooting, you know, flipping, doing all that stuff.
Yes, I love Halle Berry. I've seen every Halle Berry film in the theater since Executive Decision.
Wow.
Every single one. Like, I'm a really big Halle Berry fan.
Wow, got it. It's just funny to think that possibly her first big break was playing a crackhead in
Jungle Fever, exactly. And the way that she kind of evolved after that. No, I love Losing Isaiah. It's so much stuff. Tell me a little bit. I always like to hear about the journey for people, right? So you went to Yale School of Drama, right?
Yeah.
So what was it like, you know, coming from Baltimore, going to Yale? Like, what was this journey like to really get in Hollywood and become a working, successful actor?
Well, there was a huge gap between leaving Baltimore and going to Yale. About 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, so you were at Yale when you were an adult. You were.
Oh, I was 20. My first year, I was 29. I was married with a 3-year-old.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, like growing up, I never in my wildest dreams that I imagined I'd be doing this for a living when I was growing up. I mean, this was the furthest thing from my mind. I grew up. I mean, I grew up studying music. That was, excuse me. Ironically, aside from watching television, that was probably my big thing. You know, music. It was funny because it was one of those things where I loved to play and I hated practice. So I drove my teachers nuts. But I mean, I started playing piano when I was 6. I started writing songs when I was 7.
Oh, wow.
And I actually, for college, I went to Eastman School of Music and Conservatory. So I majored in classical composition. So I thought I was going to be a classical composer. And I left music school without graduating because I realized that I was in denial and I really wanted to be a rock star.
Yeah.
And I started, it was about a year after my daughter was born. And I found myself, I was living in Boston at the time, and I found myself working 3 jobs, 6 days a week. Wow. 7 days a week, excuse me. And I had a back injury. And one day I came off of a double shift of waiting tables, and I went to a double shift of delivering newspapers. And I delivered big, heavy bundles of the Wall Street Journal to the financial district. And it was a double shift because it was the 100th anniversary of the Wall Street Journal. So I just went to lift up a bundle, and about 6 o'clock in the morning, I just felt something go in my back. And at the time, I was also kind of used to living on adrenaline. I still, even with that schedule, I still worked out every day. So I just kind of ignored it and figured it'd work itself out over the next few days. And over the next couple of weeks, it got worse and worse and worse until one day I woke up and I couldn't get out of bed.
Wow.
And I was because we needed the money, I kept trying to go to work, but I couldn't. So for the next 2 weeks, at least 2 or 3 weeks, I was pretty much laid up. And I really started reevaluating my approach. And I started to realize that, because, one of the first things I did when because I got married straight out of college, the first time, and and we moved to Boston, the Boston area, because that's where my ex-wife was from. So one of the first things I did was I hooked up with a recording studio that was supposedly going to do a demo and help give me a record deal. And so now, almost 3 years later, I had to start admitting to myself that they were just taking me for a ride, and that was never going to happen. So really, how acting came about, I had acted in college for fun, and I know I was good at it. As a matter of fact, it's the only thing in my life I'd ever done just for fun. But I never thought people who wanted to be actors were kind of silly. So, but I started acting because I thought it was just a move of desperation. I thought, well, I can sing and I can act, so let me try that. So I started with musical. I went to a couple of musical theater auditions, and there's these people with Broadway and gospel voices. I'm like, yeah, man, I can't compete. So then I started going on. I have a nice voice, but I don't have that. So then I started going straight acting auditions, straight theater auditions, non-equity theater around town, and I just started getting cast and getting cast and getting cast. And then about a year later, on a lark, I applied to the drama school at Yale and got in.
And what was your big break, if you want to call it that, as far as in acting? What was it, The Wire? Was that your big moment? I know you were also in Great Expectations with Gwyneth Paltrow. Yeah,
I had 17 words. I literally,
you still remember it.
I counted them. I had 17 words. And, it's tricky. In terms of kind of my, the public's awareness of me, I'd probably say my big break was Oz. But I worked from the day I got out of school. When I graduated, I was understudying on Broadway 2 weeks after I graduated. And I went straight from that to a show at the Manhattan Theater Club, which then later moved off Broadway and ran for a year. And then by then I started guesting on television and just doing more on-camera stuff.
Just doing the grind.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice for people who go into auditions? And we have a lot of actors who come on the show. I'm always curious to know, how do you make an audition work? What's a good audition?
So first of all, prepare. Find what the hook is into the character. Do you know what I mean? And try to get comfortable. Try to know the scene as well as possible, but get comfortable going back and forth out of the page. Because the thing that can be tricky is if you are in the page too much, or if you try to memorize it and you're just off book enough that every time you flip a line, it throws you. You don't want that. So you want to be able to be off book enough so that it feels like you're actually engaged with the reader. But you also want to be able to feel comfortable going back and forth. And the other thing, and it took me years to figure this out, because I'm so hypersensitive, that one of the things I started to do that I didn't realize I was doing until I actually got some great feedback from a casting director, was that I would go into the room and I would, aside from saying hello to the people that were auditioning me, I wouldn't pay them any attention. So, this casting director said, because I was asking my agent for feedback at one point, and she said, well, here's the thing, I know Lance, but the problem is that when he comes in the room, he's all about the work, but he comes off as being cold, and people who hire you want to work with somebody that they think they're gonna like. Yeah.
Wow.
So you have to be good, but it's tricky because you don't want to play the like me game.
Yeah.
But by the same token, you have to be open to, open enough to feel personable.